Imagine living in a place with 1,788 rooms, 257 bathrooms, and 5 swimming pools. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's just one of the insane royal palaces we're going to show you today. We're counting down the top 10 most expensive royal palaces in the world, and trust me, you ain't seen nothing yet. These places are so fancy, they make Disneyland look like a cheap motel. But it's not just about the bling. These palaces are like time machines, taking us back to when kings and queens ruled the world. We're talking about castles that are older than your great-great-great-grandpa, and palaces that cost more than some countries' whole economies. You want to see where the richest royals in history lived, where they threw parties that would make your wildest dreams look boring? Well, you're in the right place. We're about to show you palaces so expensive they'll make your jaw drop. Windsor Castle. Windsor Castle, the OG of royal cribs. This place has seen more drama than your favorite reality show, and it's worth a cool $236 million. Yeah, you heard that right. $236 million for a fancy house. But hold up, this ain't just any old castle. Windsor's been around since William the Conqueror decided he needed a weekend getaway back in the 11th century. That's right, this place has been standing for over 1,000 years. It's seen more kings and queens than you've had hot dinners. Now you might be thinking, 1,000-year-old castle must be falling apart, right? Wrong. This place looks like it was built yesterday. It's got that Georgian style that'll make you feel like you've stepped into a Jane Austen novel. But don't worry, it's not all stuffy old furniture and dusty paintings. Windsor Castle's got more rooms than you can count. Over 1,000, they say, and each one's packed with enough fancy art to make the Louvre jealous. We're talking priceless paintings, ancient artifacts, and probably a few royal secrets hidden in the walls. But the real showstopper, St. George's Chapel. This place has seen more royal weddings than a gossip magazine. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle tied the knot here, and let me tell you, it was a party fit for, well, royalty. And get this, Windsor Castle isn't just some museum piece. Queen Elizabeth II decided to make it her permanent home during the whole COVID mess. Can you imagine quarantining in a 1,000-room castle? Talk about social distancing goals. But it's not all fun and games at Windsor. The place has seen its share of tough times too. In April 2021, they laid Prince Philip to rest right on the castle grounds. Yeah, Windsor's not just a home, it's a piece of living history. So next time you're complaining about your tiny apartment, just remember, there's a castle out there with more bathrooms than your whole building. And it's been standing strong for 1,000 years, watching the world change around it. Windsor Castle isn't just the first stop on our tour of crazy expensive royal digs. It's a symbol of everything these palaces represent: history, power, and a whole lot of cash. Axer Palace. You thought Windsor Castle was fancy? Well, buckle up, because we're about to take a trip to a palace that'll make Windsor look like a tool shed. We're talking about Axer Palace, and this place is so wild, it's literally illegal in some parts of the world. Alright, let's break it down. Axer Palace is worth a mind-blowing $663 million. That's not chump change, folks. We're talking buy a small country kind of money here. But the craziest part, this place isn't some modern luxury pad. Nah, this bad boy has been around since before Columbus even thought about sailing the ocean blue. Picture this, it's 1380. The Black Death is still fresh in everyone's minds, and most people are just trying to survive. But not Timur. This guy decides he wants a palace so big and fancy, it'll take 24 years to build. That's right, while everyone else is worried about the plague, Timur's out here planning the medieval version of MTV Cribs. Now, you might be thinking, 24 years? That's longer than I've been alive. And you'd be right, but trust me, it was worth the wait. This place is so special, UNESCO slapped a World Heritage label on it. It's like the Michelin star of old buildings. But Axer isn't just some dusty old relic. This place is still popping. They throw cultural festivals here that would make Coachella look like a backyard barbecue. Imagine partying in the same spot where medieval kings used to kick it. That's some next-level coolness right there. And let's talk about the architecture for a sec. This place is a medieval marvel. It's got more bling than a rapper's jewelry collection, but with class. We're talking intricate designs, massive domes, and enough gold to make Fort Knox jealous. It's like someone took all the fancy stuff from the Middle Ages and crammed it into one building. But here's the kicker. Axer Palace isn't just about looking pretty. This place is a living, breathing piece of history. It's connected to Emir Timur, a guy so important they named the whole Timurid Empire after him. That's like having a house built by George Washington, if George Washington had conquered half of Asia. So next time you're feeling fancy because you got a new IKEA shelving unit, just remember, there's a palace out there that took longer to build than you've been alive, is worth more money than you'll ever see, and is still throwing the hottest parties in town after 600 years. Axer Palace isn't just a building, it's a legend. And it's just the start of our journey through the most insane royal cribs in history. Trust me, things are about to get even wilder. Dolmabache Palace. Talking about Dolmabache Palace, and this place is worth a whopping $1.5 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. Billion with a B. Now you might be thinking, what makes this place so special? Well, let me tell you, this ain't just some old building. Dolmabache Palace was built in 1843 by Sultan Abdülmecit, and let me tell you, this guy knew how to spend money. You know how some people go a little crazy with the bling? Well, Sultan Abdülmecit took it to a whole new level. This palace has 14 tons of gold in it. No, I'm not kidding. 14 tons. They used gold leaf on everything. It's like King Midas went on a decorating spree. But wait, there's more. You ever seen those fancy crystal chandeliers in movies? Well, Dolmabache Palace has the biggest Bohemian crystal chandelier in the world. And get this, it was a gift from Queen Victoria. I guess when you're royalty, you don't just send a fruit basket as a housewarming gift. Now, let's talk about size. This place is huge. We're talking 285 rooms, 68 toilets, 6 hammams, that's fancy Turkish baths for you and me, and 44 halls. It's like they took a small city and put a roof on it. But Dolmabache Palace isn't just about being big and shiny. This place was built to make a point. See, back in the 1800s, the Ottoman Empire was trying to show the world they were just as modern and fancy as those European countries. So they built this palace to say, hey, look at us, we're rich and powerful too. It's like when your neighbor gets a new car, so you go out and buy a yacht. The Ottomans saw all those fancy European palaces and said, hold my sherbet, we can do better. And boy did they deliver. Istana Nurul Iman. How fancy can this place really be? Let me put it this way. If palaces were supercars, Istana Nurul Iman would be a solid gold Bugatti with diamond-encrusted wheels. This place is worth a mind-blowing $3.9 billion. That's not a typo, folks. We're talking billions with a B. But here's the kicker. This isn't some ancient relic or a museum. Nope, Istana Nurul Iman is a fully functioning home. It's where the Sultan of Brunei kicks back and watches Netflix, probably on a screen the size of a football field. This place holds the title of the largest residential palace in the world for a head of state. It's like the Sultan looked at Buckingham Palace and said, cute, but I'm gonna need something a little bigger. Now let's talk numbers, cause the stats on this place are insane. You ready for this? Istana Nurul Iman has 1,788 rooms. No, that's not a typo either. 1,788 rooms. I don't even know 1,788 people to fill those rooms. And get this, it's got 257 bathrooms. I guess when nature calls in this place, you never have to wait in line. But wait, there's more. This palace has 5 swimming pools. 5. It's like they couldn't decide on one design, so they just built them all. And let's not forget the helipad, because why drive when you can fly, right? Now you might be wondering, who came up with this crazy design? Well, let me introduce you to Leonardo V. Locsin, the mastermind behind this palatial madness. This Filipino architect didn't just design a building, he created a small city. The palace covers 200,000 square meters. That's bigger than 28 football fields put together. But Locsin didn't just go big, he went fancy. The palace is a mix of Islamic and Malay architecture with a sprinkle of modern design thrown in for good measure. It's like he took the best parts of every fancy building he'd ever seen and mashed them all together into one super palace. And here's a fun fact for you. They finished building this place in 1984, the same year Brunei got its independence from Britain. Talk about a housewarming party, huh? The construction cost back then was about $1 billion. That's like saying, hey, we're a new country now. Let's celebrate by building the most expensive house ever. So next time you're feeling fancy because you bought a new throw pillow, just remember, there's a palace out there with more rooms than some towns have people, more bathrooms than a shopping mall, and enough swimming pools to host the Olympics. Istana Nurul Iman isn't just a home, it's a whole new level of living large. Winter Palace. Mentioning Winter Palace in Russia, and this place is worth a whopping $6.44 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. Billion with a B. Now you might be wondering, what makes this palace so special? Well, let me tell you. This ain't just some fancy house. The Winter Palace has been around since Peter the Great decided he needed a cooler pad back in the day. It's like the granddaddy of all palaces. But here's the thing, the Winter Palace you see today isn't exactly what Peter had in mind. Nah, his place got a major glow-up thanks to his daughter, Empress Elizabeth. She was like, "Dad, your palace is so last century, we need something fancier." So she called up this Italian architect named Francesco Bartolomeo Rastrelli and said, "Make it pop." And boy did Rastrelli deliver. This guy turned the Winter Palace into a Baroque masterpiece. It's like he took all the fancy stuff from the 18th century and crammed it into one building. We're talking gold, we're talking marble, we're talking enough fancy artwork to make the Louvre jealous. But the real showstopper, that's gotta be the facade. This thing is so fancy it'll make your eyes hurt. It's got more columns than a Greek math book and more statues than a wax museum. It's the kind of place that screams, "Yeah, I'm rich. What about it?" Now you might be thinking, okay, it's pretty, but what's it for? Well, back in the day, this was where the Russian emperors lived. From 1732 to 1917, if you were the big boss of Russia, this was your crib. It's seen more drama than a soap opera and more intrigue than a spy novel. But here's where things get really interesting. In 1917, the whole royal thing in Russia kinda went out of style, you know, with the Russian Revolution and all that jazz. So what do you do with a massive palace when you don't have any royals to put in it? You turn it into the world's fanciest museum, of course. That's right, the Winter Palace today is part of the State Hermitage Museum. And let me tell you, this ain't your average museum. This place has got over 3 million items in its collection. 3 million! That's more stuff than you've got in your whole house, times like 1,000. We're talking paintings, sculptures, ancient artifacts, you name it, they've probably got it. It's like they took all the cool stuff from history and shoved it into one building. And the best part, you can actually go see it all. That's right, for the price of a ticket, you can walk the same halls as Russian emperors and pretend you're royalty for a day. So next time you're feeling fancy because you bought a new poster for your room, just remember, there's a palace out there that's worth more than some countries, has more artwork than you've ever seen in your life, and used to be the home of some of the most powerful people in history, Buckingham Palace. Well, get ready to have your mind blown because we're about to visit a place that makes even Russian royalty look like they were living in a shoebox. I'm talking about Buckingham Palace, the crown jewel of the British monarchy. This place is so fancy, it makes other palaces look like budget motels. Now, you might be thinking, how expensive can one building really be? Let me put it this way, if Buckingham Palace was on the market, you'd need to empty Fort Knox to buy it. We're talking about a palace worth a mind-boggling $7.2 billion. That's right, billion with a B. It's like someone took a small country's GDP and turned it into a house. But Buckingham Palace wasn't always the mega mansion it is today. Nah, this place started out as just a regular old house. Well, as regular as a house can be when it's owned by royalty. Back in the 1820s, King George IV looked at Buckingham House and thought, you know what? This place could use a little zhuzhing up. And by little, I mean he turned it into a full-blown palace. Now, let's talk numbers, cause the stats on this place are insane. You ready for this? Buckingham Palace has 775 rooms. That's not a typo, folks. 775. I don't even know 775 people to fill those rooms. And get this, it's got 52 royal and guest bedrooms and 92 offices. It's like they couldn't decide if they wanted a house or an office building, so they just went with both. But Buckingham Palace isn't just some fancy hotel for the royals to crash in. Nah, this place is the nerve center of the whole British monarchy. It's where all the big decisions get made, where they host fancy state dinners, and where they probably argue about who left the royal socks on the floor. And here's the kicker. This place is so awesome, people line up just to get a peek inside. We're talking over 50,000 visitors every year. That's more people than some towns have. It's like the Disneyland of palaces, except instead of Mickey Mouse, you might catch a glimpse of the king. Tokyo Imperial Palace. This place is so fancy, it's practically invisible. Now you might be wondering, how can a palace be invisible? Well, it's not actually invisible, but it might as well be. This place is so exclusive, you've got a better chance of seeing Bigfoot than getting inside. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk money. The Tokyo Imperial Palace is worth a mind-boggling $12.25 billion. That's right, billion with a B. It's like someone took Japan's entire economy and turned it into a house. This place makes Buckingham Palace look like a cheap motel. But here's the thing. The Tokyo Imperial Palace isn't just some fancy new building. Nah, this place has history. It's built on the remains of Edo Castle, which was where the Tokugawa shogunate used to hang out. That's like building your house on top of the White House, if the White House was a castle. Now you might be thinking, if it's so old, it must be falling apart, right? Wrong. The current version of the palace was actually built in 1888, but wait, there's more. During World War II, this place got totally destroyed. But did they give up? No way. They rebuilt it, and they made it even fancier. But here's where things get really crazy. Remember how I said this place was practically invisible? Well, that's because you can't just walk in whenever you want. The Tokyo Imperial Palace is only open to visitors twice a year. That's right, twice a year. You can visit on January 2nd for the New Year's greeting, or on February 23rd, which is the Emperor's birthday. Any other day? Forget about it. You've got a better chance of becoming the Emperor yourself. So what's inside this super secret palace? Well, it's not just one building. The whole place covers 1.32 square miles. That's bigger than some small towns. And it's not just bedrooms and bathrooms. This place has gardens that are so beautiful, they'll make your local park look like a weed patch. But the Tokyo Imperial Palace isn't just about being big and fancy, it's a symbol of the Japanese imperial family. It's like their version of the crown jewels, except it's a whole palace. This place isn't just a building, it's a piece of living history. So next time you're feeling fancy because you got a new houseplant, just remember, there's a palace out there worth more than some countries that's so exclusive you can only see it twice a year, and it's got gardens that would make Mother Nature jealous. Louvre Palace. Talking of a palace worth a mind-boggling $45.5 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. Billion with a B. It's like someone took the GDP of a small nation and turned it into art. But here's the crazy part. The Louvre didn't start out as some mega expensive museum. Nah, this place used to be where French kings kicked back and relaxed. It's like they took Buckingham Palace and said, you know what? Let's fill this bad boy with art and let everyone see it. The Louvre's been around since way back in the 16th century. That's right, while your ancestors were still figuring out how to use a fork, the French were building this masterpiece. It started out as a medieval fortress, but then King Francis I was like, this place needs a glow up. So in 1546, he turned it into a royal palace. Talk about a home improvement project. But here's where things get really wild. In 1682, Louis XIV, aka the Sun King, decided he was too cool for the Louvre and moved his whole court to Versailles. It's like he looked at this massive palace and thought, nah, not big enough. So what do you do with a giant empty palace? You fill it with art, of course. Fast forward to 1793 and boom, the Louvre becomes a museum. And not just any museum, we're talking about the most famous art museum in the world. It's like they took all the cool stuff from history and shoved it into one building. And let me tell you, this place is huge. We're talking 2,260,421 square feet of pure art and history. That's bigger than 39 football fields. You could spend days in there and still not see everything. It's like the world's biggest treasure hunt, but instead of gold, you're finding priceless art. Speaking of priceless art, you know the Mona Lisa? Yeah, she lives here, along with the Venus de Milo and about a gazillion other famous artworks. It's like the Louvre is the Hollywood of the art world, and all the celebrity paintings hang out there. But the Louvre isn't just about what's inside. The building itself is a work of art. It's gone through more makeovers than a reality TV star. Every time a new king came along, they'd add a bit here, change a bit there. It's like the world's longest running home renovation show. So next time you're feeling fancy because you bought a new poster for your room, just remember there's a palace out there that's worth more than some countries' entire economies, has more art than you could see in a lifetime, and used to be where kings and queens lived. Palace of Versailles. Now, you might be wondering, how expensive can one palace be? Let me put it this way. If Versailles was on the market, you'd need to empty every bank in Europe to afford it. We're talking about a palace worth a mind-boggling $50.7 billion. Yeah, it's like they took a small country's entire economy and said, let's make this into a house. But here's the crazy part. Versailles didn't start out as some mega expensive palace. Nah, this place used to be just a simple hunting lodge. It's like Louis XIV looked at a cabin in the woods and thought, you know what, this could be fancier. But it was his son, Louis XIV, who really went wild with the renovations. Louis XIV, also known as the Sun King, took one look at his dad's hunting lodge and said, hold my crown, I'm gonna turn this into the fanciest place on earth. And boy, did he deliver. He started expanding the place in 1661, and he didn't stop until it was big enough to fit his massive ego. Now you might be thinking, okay, it's big, but what makes it so special? Well, let me tell you. This place isn't just big, it's beautiful. We're talking about Baroque and Rococo architecture that'll make your eyes pop out of your head. It's like they took all the fancy stuff from the 17th and 18th centuries and crammed it into one building. And get this, Versailles has over 350 living units. That's not rooms, that's entire apartments. It's like they built a whole city and put a roof on it. But the inside isn't even the best part. The gardens are so big and fancy, they make Central Park look like a backyard. These gardens are no joke. We're talking about 800 hectares of perfectly manicured lawns, flower beds, fountains and sculptures. They even have their own Grand Canal. It's like they couldn't decide between a palace and a theme park, so they just made both. But Versailles isn't just about looking pretty. This place is packed with more history than your high school textbook. It was the center of political power in France from 1682 until the French Revolution in 1789. It's like they took all the important stuff that happened in France and shoved it into one building. And the events that went down here, we're talking major historical moments. The Peace of Paris in 1783, the proclamation of the German Empire in 1871, and even the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 that ended World War I. It's like this place couldn't stop being important even if it tried. So next time you're feeling fancy because you got a new couch, just remember, there's a palace out there that's worth more than some countries' entire economies, used to be a simple hunting lodge, and has seen more important historical events than a time traveler. Forbidden City. How can anything top Versailles? Let me put it this way, if the Forbidden City was on the market, you'd need to empty every bank in the world to afford it. We're talking about a palace worth a jaw-dropping $69.66 billion. Yeah, you heard that right, billion with a B. It's like they took China's entire economy and turned it into a palace. But the Forbidden City isn't just about being expensive. This place is massive. We're talking 980 buildings spread over 720,000 square meters. That's like they took a small city and said, you know what? Let's make this our house. It's so big, you could probably get lost in there for days. Now, you might be thinking, okay, it's big and expensive, but how old is it? Well, let me tell you, this place was built between 1406 and 1420. That's right, while Europe was still figuring out the Renaissance, China was building this mega palace. It's like they looked at the Great Wall and thought, that's cool, but can we live in it? But here's the really crazy part. The Forbidden City isn't just some old ruin. Nope, this place is one of the best preserved wooden structures in the world. It's like they built it to last forever. CNN even called it 3 times larger than the Louvre. It's like they took all the fancy palaces in the world and smooshed them into one super palace. And get this, the Forbidden City wasn't just a fancy house. This place was the center of Chinese power for 24 emperors. That's right, 24. It's like they built a palace so awesome, 24 emperors decided to call it home. From the Ming Dynasty to the Qing Dynasty, if you were the big boss of China, this is where you lived. But the Forbidden City isn't just about the emperors who lived there. It's about the sheer scale of the place. You know how most houses have a few rooms? Well, The Forbidden City has 9,999.5 rooms. Yeah, you heard that right, half a room. Apparently they thought 10,000 rooms would be showing off too much. It's like they were playing The Sims in real life and just couldn't stop building, and building this place was no joke. We're talking over 1 million workers and 100,000 craftsmen. It's like they gathered everyone in China and said, hey, wanna help build the coolest palace ever? And people are still loving it today. Since 2012, this place has been getting about 14 million visitors a year. In 2019, it hit a record of 19 million visitors. That's more people than some countries have. So next time you're feeling fancy because you repainted your bedroom, just remember, there's a palace out there that's worth more than some countries' entire economies, has more rooms than you can count, and took 1 million people to build. The Forbidden City isn't just a palace, it's a whole other level of royal living. The price of power. You've seen some crazy expensive palaces, but how do they stack up against modern billionaire cribs? Let me tell you, these royal digs make even the fanciest modern mansions look like cardboard boxes. Remember the Forbidden City we just talked about? Well, it's worth over $70 billion. That's more than some countries' entire economies. And get this, it makes the homes of today's richest people look like cheap motels. Take Mukesh Ambani's place in Mumbai. It's supposed to be one of the most expensive houses ever built. But guess what? It's only worth about $1 to $2 billion. That's pocket change compared to these royal palaces. Even Buckingham Palace, which isn't even the most expensive on our list, is worth $7.2 billion. That's like 3 or 4 of Ambani's houses put together. And it's got 775 rooms. I don't even know 775 people to fill those rooms, but it's not just about size. These palaces are built different. We're talking materials you can't even get anymore. The Forbidden City. It's made from rare woods and stones that probably don't even exist now. It's like they went shopping for building materials in a time machine. And Dolmabache Palace in Istanbul. This place is covered in gold and crystal. It's like King Midas went on a decorating spree. They've got 14 tons of gold in there. 14 tons. That's more bling than a rapper's jewelry collection. But here's the real kicker. These palaces have been around for hundreds of years. While modern mansions fall apart after a few decades, these royal cribs are still standing strong. It's like they built them to last forever. Take Windsor Castle. This place has been around since the 11th century. That's right, it's older than most countries, and it's still looking fresh. They've kept it in tip-top shape all these years. It's like the royal family's got a time machine to keep bringing in medieval craftsmen for touch-ups. And the Winter Palace in Russia, it got totally destroyed during World War II. But did they give up? No way. They rebuilt it, and they made it even fancier. It's like they looked at a pile of rubble and said, "Challenge accepted." So next time you see some billionaire showing off their new mansion, just remember, there are palaces out there that make those places look like garden sheds. These royal cribs aren't just big and fancy. Royal tourism. That's right, these palaces are pulling in more cash than a Vegas casino, and it's all thanks to you and me, the regular folks who want to see how the other half lived. Let's start with Buckingham Palace. This place is like the Disneyland of royal homes. It's got people lining up around the block just to get a peek inside. We're talking over 50,000 visitors every year. That's more people than some towns have. And they're all paying good money to see where the king eats his breakfast. But Buckingham Palace ain't nothing compared to the Palace of Versailles. This place is like a tourist magnet on steroids. In 2017, it had 7.7 million visitors. That's more people than the entire population of some countries. It's like everyone in the world decided to check out Louis XIV's old crib. And don't even get me started on the Forbidden City. This place is breaking records left and right. In 2019, it had 19 million visitors. That's like the entire population of New York decided to take a trip to China. It's insane. But here's the thing, running these palaces ain't cheap. It's like trying to maintain a small city. So these places gotta find a balance between letting people in and keeping the place from falling apart. Take Windsor Castle. This place is over 1,000 years old, but it's still looking fresh. How? Because they're super careful about who gets in and where they can go. It's like they've got an army of guards making sure no one's stealing the royal toilet paper. And then there's the Tokyo Imperial Palace. This place is so exclusive, you've got a better chance of seeing Bigfoot than getting inside. It's only open to visitors twice a year. That's right, twice a year. It's like they're playing hard to get with the whole world. But not all palaces are so stingy with their space. The Louvre used to be a royal palace, but now it's the world's biggest art museum. It's like they took all the fancy royal stuff and said, you know what? Let's let everyone see it. And people are loving it. This place gets more visitors than some countries get tourists.